It's 8 o'clock, so we can start.
Yes, I will read.
Yeah, go ahead.
There are different orders of reality. The objective and physical is only one order. It is convincing to the physical or externalizing mind because it is directly obvious to the senses, while of the subjective and the supraphysical that mind has no means of knowledge except from fragmentary signs and data and inferences which are at every step liable to error. Our subjective movements and inner experiences are a domain of happenings as real as any outward physical happenings. But if the individual mind can know something of its own phenomena by direct experience, it is ignorant of what happens in the consciousness of others, except by analogy with its own, or such as science, data, inferences, as its outward observation can give it. I am therefore inwardly real to myself, but the invisible life of others has only an indirect reality to me, except insofar as it impinges on my own mind, life, and senses. This is the limitation of the physical mind of man, and it creates in him a habit of believing entirely only in the physical and of doubting or challenging all that does not come into accord with his own experience or his own scope of understanding or square with his own standard or some of established knowledge.
Okay. So the very first sentence is absolutely a stunning one. Okay. You have to understand it. There are different orders of reality. Reality also is a graded thing. Okay. At the lowest level, what seems to us to be the absolute reality, and what seems to us at our level here, that the physical world is the absolute reality, and the highest is the no reality at all for us. It's exactly the opposite. When you are at the highest level, that is the only reality, and all the rest, even the physical world, is unreal. So there is a different order of reality. At each level, when you go, there is a different order of reality. Okay, depending on the relation between consciousness and force, or Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the one that is consciousness watching the object. The subject is watching the object, and depending on what instruments of knowledge the subject is using, the object becomes less real or more real. Okay, so it's very interesting. That's what he's saying, and he's now going into detail about this. The objective and physical is only one order. The physical world is real to us, but as we keep going higher and higher, it does not seem to be real at all. That's only one object. But if our definition of reality is as broad as what Sylvia is saying, then the whole question arises, what is the ultimate reality? Okay, so that will be. The objective in the physical is only one order. It is convincing to the physical or externalizing mind. Sylvia is saying externalizing mind, that which goes outwards. Okay? But that which goes inwards is an internalizing mind. That also you have one which looks into yourself. But mostly it's the one that goes outwards, based on the senses. Note interestingly that all the senses, the five senses, are all outward oriented. And that's why if you depend on the sense knowledge, then they are all only outward oriented, not a single one going inside. Okay? Because of the externalizing mind, because it is directly obvious to the senses, while of the subjective and the supraphysical, that mind has no means of knowledge except from fragmentary signs and data and inferences which are at every step liable to error. Now, let us see what he's saying. Okay? He's saying that the objective world is real to you, but the subjective, okay? That means my own thoughts and my own feelings are real to me. If I'm angry, I know that I'm angry and it's real to me. or if I'm feeling very loving, then that is real to me. But what about others? Whatever their subjective thoughts or their subjective emotions, I don't see and I don't know. It's not real to me. But from some data that we collect, then we know to a certain extent, and that may also be full of error. That's what Seth is saying. Let's say I'm going in the street and someone unknown to me smiles at me. Then you immediately deduce that he is well disposed towards me. Okay? 90% of the time, this may be right. But on the other hand, if he is a hypocrite and he wants to cheat you, he will give a smile, which is a hypocritical smile, and then you make a mistake. That's what Srinath is saying. Okay? And when you, the supraphysical, that mind has no means of knowledge, except from fragmentary signs. Fragmentary signs are the outward, the orientation. Okay? It may be a gesture, you're calling someone with a smile, and then you come to the conclusion that he wants to say something nice to me. But as soon as you go to him, he may start cursing you or even beating you up. Okay? That's the error. So when you depend on these fragmentary signs and data and inferences, which are at every step liable to error. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Our subjective movements and inner experiences are a domain of happenings as real as any outward physical happenings. They are absolutely real to you, although they are subjective. Okay? Others can't see, but if I'm happy, it's absolutely a fact to me. If I'm angry, it's a fact to me, not to others. Okay? But if the individual mind can know something of its own phenomena by direct experience, it is ignorant of what happens in the consciousness of others, except by analogy with its own or such signs, data, influences as its outward observation may give. But just now he has told us that outward observation from data and signs may be quite mistaken. It may be right some of the time, but it's also mistaken. So, I am therefore inwardly real to myself, but the invisible life of others has only an indirect reality to me, except insofar as it impinges on my own mind, life, and senses. Now, what do you mean by this? The invisible life of somebody else, okay? Except insofar as it impinges on my own mind. Okay? And whatever he's saying, for instance, okay, or he's thinking, it may impinge on my own mind and life and senses. Sometimes you can, from outward signs also, you can make out whether they are, what their intentions are. Okay, so that's what he's saying. To a certain extent, we can understand, but mostly the thoughts and emotions of others are absolutely unknown to us. This is the limitation of the physical mind. The physical mind is a manas, remember, and is the lowest mind in the human being. Physical mind, vital mind, pure mind, and then it goes into the spiritual planes of consciousness one by one. There is a limitation of the physical mind of man, and it creates in him a habit of believing entirely in the physical and of doubting or challenging all that does not come into accord with his own experience or his own scope of understanding or square with his own standard or some of establishment. That is the reason why everybody has a different opinion of somebody. Okay? Because you see only little bit, partly may be wrong, partly may be right, but it's all, that's why we have different opinions of the world. Even physical things, we have different opinions. Okay? So, here is what Srinath is saying in this paragraph. The next paragraph we can read. This is very simple.
Rangada, one question. Rangada,
Yes,
here, physical mind of man is the manas.
Is the what?
Manas.
Yes, that's right. Manas. The physical mind. That
which is
senses.
Exactly. Which is supposed to be the sixth sense according to the Indian philosophy.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. I just wanted to.
Because
Thanks.
if the manas is not there, you will understand nothing. Although all your senses are working.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. I'll read the next para.
Yes, please. This egocentric attitude.
This egocentric attitude has in recent times been elevated into a valid standard of knowledge. It has been implicitly or explicitly held as an axiom that all truth must be referred to the judgment of the personal mind, reason, and experience of every man, or else it must be verified or at any rate verifiable by a common or universal experience in order to be valid. But obviously, this is a false standard of reality and of knowledge, since this means the sovereignty of the normal or average mind and its limited capacity and experience, the exclusion of what is supernormal or beyond the average intelligence. In its extreme, this claim of the individual to be the judge of everything is an egoistic illusion, a superstition of the physical mind, in the mass, a gross and vulgar error. The truth behind it is that each man has to think for himself, know for himself, according to his capacity, but his judgment can be valid only on condition that he is ready to learn and open always to a larger knowledge. It is reasoned that to depart from the physical standard and the principle of personal or universal verification will lead to gross delusions and the admission of unverified truth and subjective fantasy into the realm of knowledge. But error and delusion and the introduction of personality and one's own subjectivity into the pursuit of knowledge are always present, and the physical or objective standards and methods do not exclude them. The probability of error is no reason for refusing to attempt discovery, and subjective discovery must be pursued by a subjective method of inquiry, observation, and verification. Research into the supraphysical must evolve, accept and test an appropriate means and methods, other than those by which one examines the constituents of physical objects and the processes of energy in material nature.
Okay, so he has gone a little further now. And so what we'll do, this is a second para we are reading today. So I will first read the summary so that we get the basic idea, and then we'll look into his details of what he's saying. This egocentric, self-centered way of knowledge. Okay, he's saying very clearly, he has explained to us that we understand ourselves, but we understand nothing of the others because they are egocentric. And we understand to a certain extent, but only as far as it affects us. Okay, that's why it is egocentric. Self-centered way of knowledge, based on one's own physical senses, has been validated in recent times as the only true cognition. In fact, this is the materialistic view, that depend on yourself and what you see is valid for you and nothing else is not. Anything that is verifiable by the senses is real and valid. There is a materialistic stand. There is a materialistic stand, which of course Srivendra does not agree with. And it's very obvious that it's not like that. It is hypothetically asserted that all knowledge to be considered as valid and true must satisfy the personal mind, individual mind, reason and experience of the individual. This view cannot be considered as justifiable because the ordinary mind of man is limited and imperfect and is yet made the final arbiter of all true knowledge. This is a gross error. The error of the physical mind and the materialist who says that you have to depend entirely on your senses and your mind. So, Srivendra does not agree, obviously. However, there is truth behind this way of thinking. It is that each person must think for himself, know according to his capacity, but he must be ready to go further with an open mind and not take his present knowledge as final. That's a mistake that the materialist is making, that what you see is final. But Srivendra is saying there is a certain truth to it that everybody must go by their own standards. They can't go by other people's standards. That would be hypocrisy and also not the right one. You must lean on yourself, depend on yourself, but not take your understanding of things as final. You must be open-minded and you must be ready to move ahead with other ways of knowledge. Okay? But he must be ready to go further with an open mind and not take his present knowledge as final. Then it is held that to depart from the physical facts may well lead to inaccuracies, errors, distortions. Okay? But there's an element of truth in that, because what you don't know, if you go into subtle fields, you might make a mistake. Okay? That so far it is true. But then what to do? Now, Srivendra says something very interesting. He says that if you want knowledge of the subtle worlds, then you have to use subtle instruments. You can't use gross instruments to know the reality of the subtle worlds. That's the interesting part. Remember, he has told us also earlier that depending on the instruments of knowledge at each level will be the reality that you will be facing. So, I'm reading this summary again. It is held means it is normally thought to be that to depart from the physical facts may well lead to the inaccuracies, errors, and distortions. So far, correct. But this weakness is true of all human knowledge, which is always subject to error. Why only subtle fields? Even the gross fields also will make mistake. Okay? But again, the possibility of error must not restrict us to only the physical field. The unwillingness to expand one's borders because of the possibility of error is a weak and sterile attitude. The hesitation to investigate the subjective fields is not justified because there is no verification possible. Okay? So that's what the materialists will say. The verification of subjective experience must be done by subjective methods and subjective instruments. There you are, very clear statement. So the argument of the materialist is absolutely wrong. Okay? He does not realize that he is using the senses are only instruments of knowledge. He doesn't realize that. The verification of subjective experience must be done by subjective methods and subjective instruments. Okay? So, objective standards can have no application there in the subjective fields. This we have discussed many times. If you want to see the atoms, then you have to use a microscope. If you want to see the stars in the heavens, you have to use a telescope. You have to change the instrument of knowledge. Okay, that's exactly what he's saying. Then, once again, oh, that's all. That's what he's saying. Okay, so objective standards can have no application in the subtle worlds. Now, we'll read each sentence and see whether it's clear. The egocentric attitude has in recent times been elevated into a valid standard of knowledge. There is a materialistic standpoint. Okay? Whatever you see with your senses is the only reality. It has been implicitly or explicitly held as an axiom. Axiom means a hypothesis. Okay? You start from the axiom that this is true. Okay? That all truth must be referred to the judgment of the personal mind, reason, and experience of every man, or else it must be verified, or at any rate, verifiable. Okay? Even if it's not verified, it should be possible to verify it. Any rate, verifiable by common or universal experience in order to be valid. So what does the sentence mean? Okay? If I am seeing something and nobody else is seeing, then it's not valid. But if I am seeing and 10 others also are seeing, then it has some validity. But if I am seeing and 100 others are seeing, then it has more validity. That's what Sundar pointed out. Okay? Read that sentence. That all truth must be referred to the judgment of the person, mind, reason, experience of every man, or else it must be verified, or at any rate verifiable by common or universal experience. Everybody must be able to see that in order to be valid. Now, is this correct? So everybody is saying it's absolutely wrong. It's not right at all. But obviously, this is a false standard of reality and of knowledge, since this means the sovereignty of the normal and average mind and its limited capacity and experience. The exclusion of what is supernormal or beyond the average intelligence. It reminds me of a very interesting experience. The more number of people who it reminds me of something very funny. Okay? So there's the more number of people who experience, then it's got more validity. Okay? This is a theory that is being propounded here. So the question of the Hindi language to be the national language of India, when it came up, there was somebody who came up with a very interesting argument. Okay? And the argument is that it is spoken by the maximum number of people. Therefore, it should be the most popular, so it should be the national language of India. So, so the argument was that this, long ago, there used to be a song called La Re Lappa, La Re Lappa. It was a very funny song, but it was very popular. So the fellow said that if that is the standard, then this La Re Lappa should be the national song of India, national anthem. So obviously, that argument is wrong. That's what Sylvia is pointing out. Popularity and the number of people saying is not an index, because the mind is, the instrument is the same order, making the same mistake. Okay. But obviously, this is a false standard of reality and knowledge. Since this means the sovereignty of the normal or average mind and its limited capacity and experience, the exclusion of what is supernormal or beyond the average intelligence. So, maximum number of people are seeing only the physical world. So, the argument is wrong. In its extreme, this claim of the individual to be the judge of everything is an egoistic illusion, a superstition of the physical mind. Now, the physical mind again is the same thing, what I said earlier, the manas. Okay? So, in the mass, a gross and vulgar error. Now, the word vulgar, Srimba often uses in the old sense that it is common, not a negative sense. We use the word vulgar in a very in a different way, but the word vulgar can also mean very common, nothing special about it. Okay? Very gross and vulgar error. The truth behind it is that each man has to think for himself. Now, Srimba is giving the truth. There is a truth to it. And what is the truth? The truth behind it is that each man has to think for himself and not go by other people's opinions. Know for himself according to his capacity. But his judgment can be valid only on condition that he is ready to learn and open always to a larger knowledge. He must be open-minded. It is reason. Now, when somebody says it is reason, he is not speaking. He is talking of the others. It is reason that would depart from the physical standard and the principle of personal or universal verification will lead to gross delusions and the admission of unverified truth and subjective fantasy into the realm of knowledge, into the kingdom, into the field, into the area of knowledge. But error and delusion and the introduction of personality and one's own subjectivity into the pursuit of knowledge are always present. And the physical or objective standards and methods do not exclude them. Even when you have sense knowledge, it is finally subjective because the mind is understanding. That's what Srimba pointed out. The probability of error is no reason for refusing to attempt discovery. This is very interesting what Srimba is saying. One should never be afraid of making a mistake and therefore I won't do it. This is absolutely wrong because then you will get stuck at your static condition. You will not be able to progress. Okay? The probability of error is no reason for refusing to attempt discovery. And subjective discovery must be pursued by a subjective method of inquiry. There you are. Okay? If you are in the subjective field, the appropriate instruments have to be used, not objective instruments. Subjective method of inquiry. Observation and verification. Now, this is exactly what Srimba is doing. Okay? He said in one letter to Dilip Kumar Roy that I have been using the scientific method of detailed examination, verification, like nobody else has done before. Every time he had an experience, he would go on verifying it and seeing it, whether in other conditions it is right or wrong. Okay. He found at one time that his will was effective. First he tried with animals, if you remember, with crows, then with human beings, then even with events in the physical world, whether his will is having an effect or not. And he went on verifying until finally it became, he was convinced that yes, it's a power. I just remind you of the experience that that Sadhguru had. Okay? He also found out that his will has power. It was a very interesting experience. He himself said that one day he wished that a mango on the tree would fall down. And to his surprise, he saw that it fell. So he wondered whether this is a power in his own subjective being. And he said, okay, let me verify it. And he said, okay, I want the other mango to fall. And it fell. And he repeated his experience 4 or 5 times. And then he could conclude that yes, there is a power in me to affect the physical world outside myself. That's exactly what Sri Aurobindo did. Probability of error is no reason for refusing to attempt discovery. These are cowardly people who don't venture to discover, afraid of making a mistake. Okay? This is what Singh say. So, subjective discovery must be pursued by subjective method of inquiry, observation and verification. These are the scientific methods: inquiry, observation, verification, repeatability. These are valid absolutely in the yogic field also. Okay. Pursued by subject method inquiry, observation. Research into the supraphysical must evolve, accept, and test an appropriate means and methods other than those by which one examines the constituents of physical objects and processes of energy in material nature. Just as you are doing in science, you have to do the same in the subjective field. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. And we have time, so we can read the next para also. Kiran, you have the text with you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. To refuse to inquire, read.
Yes. To refuse to inquire upon any general ground, preconvinced and a priori is an obscurantism as prejudicial to the extension of knowledge, as the religious obscurantism which opposed in Europe the extension of scientific discovery. The greatest inner discoveries, the experience of self-being, the cosmic consciousness, the inner calm of the liberated spirit, the direct effect of mind upon mind, the knowledge of things by consciousness in direct contact with other consciousness or with its objects. Most spiritual experiences of any value cannot be brought before the tribunal of the common mentality which has no experience of these things and takes its own absence or incapacity of experience as a proof of their invalidity or their non-existence. Physical truth or formulas, generalizations, discoveries founded upon physical observation can be so referred, but even there a training of capacity is needed before one can truly understand and judge. It is not very untrained mind that can follow the mathematics of relativity or other difficult scientific truths or judge of the validity either of the result of the process. All reality, all experience must indeed, to be held as true, be capable of verification by same or similar experience. So, in fact, all men can have a spiritual experience and can follow it out and verify it in themselves, but only when they have acquired the capacity or can follow the inner methods by which that experience and verification are made possible. It is necessary to dwell for a moment on these obvious and elementary truths because the opposite ideas have been sovereign in a recent period of human mentality. They are now only receding. They have stood in the way of the development of a vast domain of possible knowledge. It is of supreme importance for the human spirit to be free to sound the depths of inner and subliminal reality, of spiritual and of what is still superconscious reality, and not to immure itself in the physical mind and its narrow domain of objective external solitudes. For in that way alone can there come liberation from the ignorance in which our mentality dwells, and a release into a complete consciousness, a true and integral self realization and self knowledge.
Yeah. Very interesting para. Then we'll have a quick look at it. I think we can finish it. When he's saying very interesting, to refuse to inquire upon any general ground, preconceived and an a priori as an obscurantism is an obscurantism, as prejudicial to the extension of knowledge as the religious obscurantism which opposed in Europe the extension of scientific discovery. Okay? He's saying that to start with the thing that only what I know is true and what the others are saying is not true, this is obscurantism. Obscurantism means a confusion and ignorance of the mind. And not only ignorance, but it's also an egoistic ignorance. It is obscurantism means absolutely you refuse to see further. Okay. A priori means from the beginning. You say that the ascetic is saying the physical world is unreal. Okay. He's starting from the a priori. He's starting from the subject. The axiom itself is saying that this is not true. It's the opposite also for the ascetic as well as the materialist. So, as prejudicial to the extent of knowledge, as a religious obscurantism that was in Europe. Okay. Science, they condemned science. You remember the famous Galileo and the other who said that the church was saying, the Bible, not Bible maybe, but church was saying that the whole universe goes around, the sun goes around the earth. Okay? And when science said the opposite, he was ostracized and even threatened with excommunication. And he had to admit that the Bible was, or the Christian theory was right, but under his low voice he whispered to himself, but what I'm saying is right. Okay, so they were simply referring to here. Okay. The greatest inner discoveries, the experience of self-being, the cosmic consciousness, the inner calm of the liberated spirit, the direct effect of mind upon mind, the knowledge of things by consciousness in direct contact with other consciousness, all these objects, most spiritual experiences of any value cannot be brought before the tribunal of the common mentality, which has no experience of these things and takes its own absence or incapacity of experience as a proof of their invalidity or their non-existence. Okay, so big sentence. We'll have a quick look at it. The greatest inner discoveries are naturally the spiritual experience. So the experience of self-being, okay, when you experience the self-being, I am pure self and pure consciousness. That's what is referring to. Then the cosmic consciousness, when you see that the whole universe is within you, or you are in everything in the physical universe. Then the inner calm of the liberated spirit, liberation, you realize that you are not a body-mind life. You are pure consciousness. The direct effect upon mind, of mind upon mind, he is referring to telepathy. Okay? The knowledge of things by consciousness in direct contact with other consciousness is what is called ESP, extrasensory perception. All these objects, most spiritual experiences of any value cannot be brought before the tribunal of the common mentality, which has no experience of these things and takes its own absence. I can't see, therefore it is not true. That's the attitude that Shendra is referring to. And takes its own absence or incapacity of experience as a proof of their invalidity or their non-existence. Okay? Both are possible. Either you say it is invalid, it may be there, but it's not valid, or it doesn't exist because I don't see it. Physical truths or formulas, generalizations, discoveries founded upon physical observation can be so referred. But even there, a training of capacity is needed before one can truly understand and judge. Okay, so it's very interesting. You are using your senses and your mind to understand things in science, but there also you need training. That's what Sundar is pointing out. It is not every untrained mind that can follow the mathematics of relativity or other difficult scientific truths or judge of the validity either of the result or the process. You need to be trained for it. All reality, all experience must indeed, to be held as true, be capable of verification by a same or similar experience. So when the materialist tells you that you experience a calm, but I don't experience, therefore is wrong, so you can tell him, exactly as in science, why are you going by the text that are telling you something? Verify it for yourself. There you can verify. Similarly, here also you can verify. Okay, that's the argument that you can give. Okay, so all reality, all experience must indeed, to be held as true, be capable of verification by same or similar experience. So, in fact, all men have a spiritual experience, and all men can have a spiritual experience and can follow it out and verify it themselves. But only when they have acquired the capacity or can follow the inner methods by which that experience and verification are made possible. So you have to equip. Just as in science, you have to equip yourself. Here in yoga also and spiritual field, you have to equip yourself by purification and concentration. It is necessary to dwell for a moment on these obvious and elementary truths because the opposite ideas have been sovereign in a recent period of human mentality. Recent period of human mentality, he is talking about the materialistic attitude. Now it has disappeared, no? That's what he's saying. They are now only receding. Okay, after the quantum theory, science changes. Science started becoming philosophy. Okay? After the quantum theory, they are now only receding and have stood in the way of the development of a vast domain of possible knowledge. It is supreme. It's of supreme importance for the human spirit to be free to sound the depths of inner or subliminal reality or spiritual and of what is still superconscious reality, and not to immure yourself. The word immure is very interesting. It means to wall in. The French word is mure, M-U-R-E, mure, means wall. So to immure yourself means to wall yourself in. Okay, that's what it means. In the physical mind and its narrow domain of objective external solidities. For in that way alone can there come liberation from the ignorance in which our mentality dwells and a release into the complete consciousness, a true and integral self-realization and a self-knowledge. So the conclusion is that at whichever level you are, use the right instruments of knowledge. Don't use the wrong ones. That's what he said. Okay. 8:39. So we have come to this. Now we have to read the next one. An integral knowledge demands an exploration. We'll do that next time. Now that is next time is tomorrow itself. So an integral knowledge demands. Okay. Okay. It's 8:40, so I have to stop here now. I have another class now.
Merci
Okay.
beaucoup.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Au revoir. Thank you, Dada.